Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our community conversation today. We'll get started here in about 5 minutes, right around noon. Talk to you soon. Well, once again, good afternoon, everyone. Thrilled that so many of you are able to join us for our community conversation as we get rolling with the 2021-22 school year. So as you can see on the grid view, join with me is our Director of Curriculum, Aaron Green, our Communication Coordinator, Dan Faust, and our Assistant Superintendent, Jenny Palco, who will be helping me throughout the time we're together this afternoon. So kind of procedurally, we are going to go through in the first half of our discussion today, our operating procedures for this upcoming school year. So Last year, we called it our responsible restart plan. This year, it's just kind of highlighting some operating procedures that may be a little different because we're still in the midst of a pandemic and want to ensure not only the safety and health of all of our staff and students, but also meeting the academic, educational, social, emotional needs of our students and balancing those two needs as we put certain protocols and restrictions into place. So that's what we're going to do first. We'll go through some slides and updating everybody on the procedures. Then we'll open it up to questions that you've been submitting through our online form based on the email that was sent out last week and earlier this morning. We'll answer questions related to the operating procedures. Then we'll after we get through the questions there, we will transition on this same live stream into discussing all things related to our Strongsville Online Learning Opportunity Academy or Solo Academy. So for families that have already enrolled in Solo or are interested in enrolling in Solo, just continue on with us because we're going to talk about that in the second half of this, our time together. And as always, the link to this recording, this video will be on SCS TV at any time for anybody to watch. So let's go ahead and get started. These slides that I'm going to share with you tonight, you don't need to take screenshots or copy things down. I've got a parent update ready to go that we'll send out later on this afternoon, and it'll have links to everything that's in this presentation, including the presentation will be sent to you later on today, so you'll have access to it. And we'll eventually get it on our website as well. So besides just a few introductory items, want to start talking about learning options. If you remember from last school year, we talked about learning frameworks where at times based on COVID, students could be in-person learning or blended learning or remote learning. And then we had SCS Connects and our virtual options. Well, this year for the upcoming school year, there are only two options for students enrolled in Strongsville City Schools. So the first option is in-person learning. And no matter what governmental agency you look at, whether it's the CDC or the Ohio Department of Health or the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, they are all saying students need to be in school for in-person learning. And so we will obviously offer in-person learning for students, and they'll be physically present in all of their classes. Now, all of those other frameworks I talked about earlier, the remote learning, the blended learning like we did last year, you don't see those here because they're no longer legally permissible for us to provide to our students. So last year, there was a law that was passed to say, hey, school districts, we know based on COVID, you're going to need some flexibility. So you can live stream and you could have students at home, students in school. You can provide a completely remote experience if you would want. That law expired at the end of last school year and they did not extend it. So even if we wanted to, that's not a possibility for us. So we will never be in blended learning this year. We will never be in remote learning this year. We will only be in in-person learning. And the only exception to that is if we have to quarantine a classroom, then we would have to live stream that classroom. But other than that, all of those options are over. The other thing that we have an option to do is we have an option to offer a virtual academy. We've had one for a lot of years, so we decided to continue to do that. And I have to say that this is not something that a lot of school districts are offering. There's 610-ish school districts in the state of Ohio, and a little over 130 school districts are offering a virtual option. So we are pleased to offer that to our families. And we will talk again, the second half of our time together this afternoon, we will talk all details about the Solo Academy. But just please know going into the conversation, your child is either in person or they are in the Solo Academy, which is a virtual option where they're not on campus. So let's go ahead and continue on in the conversation here in some other areas of the school district and what restrictions or what procedures will be in place. So first of all, for student services, what we're talking about here is students that are on IEP special education services. One of the things we started last year is we called it a remote learning plan. Since remote learning is not an option anymore, we just updated the title to a virtual learning plan. But same format, same structure. Every student in our district that was with us last year has a virtual learning plan. It was implemented at the beginning of last year at a child's annual review. It was updated, and basically it looks at, hey, if my child decides to go into the Solo Academy, or A building or a classroom needs to quarantine for a period of time, and they're getting their learning primarily at home. What does specially designed instruction look like? What accommodations, modifications, supports are going to be there? So it's not like we have to guess if and when that happens. We're ready to go. So just a reaffirmation that if you have a child with a disability that has an IEP, they should have a virtual learning plan in place. If you're new to our school district or have a child that is identified sometime throughout the school year, you will have a meeting to discuss and solidify the virtual learning plan for the upcoming school year. In terms of athletics and performances, so last year, we have to remember last year there were health orders and health mandates. The school district didn't have a lot of leeway in some areas, and one of those were athletics and performances. There were health orders that said you have to control attendance, you have to control social distancing, you have to control all of these aspects. Well, as you know, all of those health orders and mandates are gone in the state of Ohio that were present last year. And so the local district has decision making that they can make. And so the presentation I'm giving to you today, I gave to the board on Thursday, shared my recommendations, and everything that is in here is consensus between what the recommendations that I presented and the board feedback. And so one of those is in terms of what do we want to do with athletics and performances. And so what has been decided is at this point in time, based on how we're doing in Strongsville City Schools with any COVID-related spread or prevalence, is that we are not going to put any restrictions in terms of athletic events or performances, whether those are indoor or outdoor. So last year, no general fans were able to come to any fall sporting events. Fans can come back to our sporting events this year. Tickets won't be limited just to an athlete or just for immediate family members. Anybody that wants to purchase tickets can purchase tickets. Marching band will travel to away games and play at home games. When we talk about getting ready for a fall play, theater, music concerts, again, the same scenario will be present as I just shared with athletics. If you want to come and support those performances, you can. With everything that I'm going to talk about this afternoon, they all have a little asterisk over it that says, hey, if conditions change, so may these rules. So right now on August 9th, this is the plan that we have. But if conditions change, we may put further restrictions in. But here's where we're starting the school year in terms of athletics and performances. In terms of food services, last year, based on a federal program, all students were able to receive free breakfast and lunch every day. That program was extended for this upcoming school year. So students are still able, whether you're an in-person learner or in the Solo Academy, you're still able to get free breakfast and lunch. You don't need to sign up for anything. Other than the elementary, you have to pre-register the day before for your food order, but you're able to go through the line and get your meal. Last year, we had different scenarios in terms of how we operated our cafeterias. We had students in classrooms. We had a combination of cafeteria and in classrooms, and we even used one of the gyms as overflow at the high school. This upcoming year, all students will be back into the multi-purpose room or commons or cafeteria, wherever they may eat in their building. And we're going to continue to separate students at least 3 feet apart as space allows. In terms of all the guidance, and I'll continue to mention through the CDC, ODH, or the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, they all send a similar message. In-person learning is important. We need to have kids in person in schools, and we want them to socially distance at 3 feet when possible, as long as that doesn't take students out of that environment or alleviate students from opportunities or experiences. So we'll do that in the cafeteria as well. We've always discouraged sharing outside food during breakfast and lunch and classroom celebrations, so that's there as well. In terms of the cafeteria procedures, these are what will be in place for the upcoming school year. At the middle school and high school, a lot of times prior to COVID, we had kind of a self-service bar, like here's a self-service salad bar or a sub sandwich bar. We're still going to have those next year, but we're not going to allow students to serve themselves. We will have an adult monitoring. So kind of if you go to Subway and just kind of say, hey, I want some lettuce, I want green pepper, whatever it may be, they'll still be able to do that. We'll be increasing our options for students. at all levels, but all the food will still be handled by the adults until it's given to a student to take back to their seat and eat. In terms of transportation, we are, this is one area where there has been a mandate, and that's through the CDC. They've mandated that on all public transportation, facial coverings must be worn by students and adults, and they consider school buses public transportation. So in terms of the bus stop, waiting for the bus stop at home, being outdoors, students are not required to wear those facial coverings, but once they enter the school bus and get on the school bus, per the CDC, they are required to wear facial coverings on our district transportation. On our typical school buses, we can fit 70 to 72 students. We put in seating restrictions last year, and we're going to keep with those for this year. So that's we're going to reduce that down to no more than 44 students on a bus. That means 2 students per seat. We're still going to ask and have folks in the same household, kids in the same household, sit together, and all students will have assigned seating. That way, if we do have a COVID positive case, we know who was sitting where, so we can do the applicable contact tracing. Now, in terms of if you're unsure, does my student even qualify for busing? Our board policy designates busing based on non-busing streets. And the guideline is about if you live within a mile, you don't receive busing. If you live more than a mile away from your school building, you do. But that link there, you can check it out when I send it to you. That will go through for every school building. Here's the streets that do not receive busing. In terms of communication timeline, everything is out there in terms of busing that you would need to know at this point of the year. So if you're wondering, what's my child pickup time in the morning or drop off in the afternoon, log into your child's or your Power School Unified Classroom accounts. That's all in there. It's been in there since August 2nd. As you know, we have an app that allows you to see where your child's bus is at through a GPS system. It's called Here Comes the Bus. All the information is in there as well, but the app's not going to be functional, obviously, until the buses are moving on the first day of school. If you don't have that app on your phone and you're wondering how to get the secure login for your child, the directions are linked there, and I'm sure your building principals will be sending that or have already sent it to you, so you can get slated to know where your child's at in their route to or from school. In terms of some procedural updates for parents and students, in terms of building visitors, last year we did not allow any visitors to our building at all, as well as volunteers. We are going to start to allow select visitors and volunteers into the buildings, but as you can see here, and I'm talking about during the school day when students are in session. Our buildings are available for rental or usage before or after school, but this is when students are in there. So as long as an adult has a designated purpose or appointment, you are able to enter our building. So that would be for meetings, or if you have a child in the clinic, or need to see your child for some reason or see a staff member. As long as you have an appointment or a specific purpose, you'll check in through our visitor management system. You'll have to do a screener to assure us that you're symptom-free, and then you'll be allowed into the building for that specific purpose. At the elementary level, just to give a clear example, this means that we don't permit any visitors that want to come in and have lunch with their child or be out on the playground with their child during recess. That's not something that we would designate as a specific purpose or need at this time, and so limiting our visitors, that's not going to be permissible. If we get to October and the classroom party celebration season and we feel we're in a spot where we can have those, we will limit volunteers in each classroom. And then at any level, we will allow limited volunteers into the schools again next year for a specific purpose. If a teacher or a staff member or principal requests some volunteers, it will only be one volunteer permitted at a time in whatever designated area that is. So we're still going to restrict highly visitors and volunteers in our building, but allow some opportunities as have been listed here. In terms of just miscellaneous procedures, we're going to have open houses this year. Depending on the level will depend what the structure will be. So check out your building principal's newsletters, which will detail it. But in general terms, at the elementary level, we will have in-person open houses divided by alphabet. That way we can manage the number of people that are in the buildings at one time. At the middle school, there's going to be a meet the teacher in person opportunity as well as a virtual opportunity. And then at the high school level, there will be a virtual opportunity, but with live interaction. Again, just trying to manage the numbers of people. And obviously at the middle school and high school, we have more students and more people than in the other building. So details about open houses, big picture overview is what I just stated, but look at your building newsletters for specifics. You know, one of the biggest positives we received in our focus groups or feedback was parents and staff loving virtual options for meetings, whether it be parent-teacher conferences, whether it be just parent meetings for IEPs or 504s, or just kind of talking with the teacher about how things are going or the principal. So we are going to be flexible and based on parent need or teacher availability, both will continue to be offered for this upcoming year. So if you want to have an in-person meeting and the conditions are where we can allow that, we'll allow that. If virtual works best for you, we will do that as well. And just as a reference, if you're wondering what are all of our other student procedures and rules and guidelines, the student handbooks are linked here so you could take a look and get updated on those items. So health and safety protocols. I know this is, you know, as I previewed the questions that were coming in prior to the start of the meeting, this is you know, what's on the minds of our staff and our families. And so this is where we are going to detail what are we doing as a school district. And so let me kind of give you an opening discussion about this. So you know, when we look at last year, all the entities that could give orders or mandates did. And we followed those. So when there was a mandate that said, you know, everybody has to wear masks in a school setting, everybody wore masks in a school setting. We talked about the restrictions in athletics and performances. So all of those mandates and orders went away. And the only mandate that's still out there is the one from the CDC on the wearing the mask during busing. The Cuyahoga County Board of Health, they always gave recommendations. They never mandated. And there's new laws now that say basically health organizations, they can't put into local in the state of Ohio. They can give recommendations. And so what we did, you know, as a district, is we took a look at all of the suggestions and we modeled it after the Ohio Department of Health guidance. And said, as a school district, based on what we learned, what we know, what is important and what makes sense here in Strongsville City Schools, what are the restrictions that we're going to put in place? Because if you take a look at the hierarchy of how things are done, the CDC is giving recommendations based on what they think is best globally for the entire country. The Ohio Department of Health is giving recommendations on what they think is best globally for the entire state of Ohio. And Cuyahoga County is giving recommendations based on what they think is best for the entire county. Now, I don't want to speak for any of those groups, but if I was a part of those groups, I would probably, when you're talking about a grander scale, take the most cautious approach, put in the most restrictions, and give that information, that recommendation. As a school district, that's a subpart of, you know, we live in Ohio, we live in Cuyahoga County, we're in one section of Cuyahoga County. And based on what we learned and lived through this past year, what do we feel is in the best interest of the health and safety and education of our students? I would also say that, you know, in terms of the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, one of the popular questions I get is, well, why aren't you following the recommendations for the Cuyahoga County Board of Health that they're saying, you know, all of these organizations are saying, hey, they're recommending universal masking. As I've said, they're making global statements based on large populations. The Cuyahoga County Board of Health, we take into consideration all of those recommendations, national, state, and local. But I want to make sure everybody's clear. Last year, the Cuyahoga County Board of Health said we shouldn't have sports, and they said we should not open up schools at all. We took that into consideration, and we said, hey, let's go ahead and open up in September. Let's open up for in-person learning, and let's see how we do, and let's look at the data and let's look at the trends to see where it goes. And if it works well and we can go forward, great. If it doesn't, we can easily put restrictions into place. In the second half of the year, the Cuyahoga County Board of Health came back and said schools should not reopen after the winter holidays. They should take X amount of time off. We should be very cautious. We took that into consideration. And we had a pragmatic approach that we worked through to get kids back. And we were in-person learning, and we're able to do that extremely well without closure in the second half of the school year. So as a school district, we've always taken all of these things into consideration and made strategic and deliberate decisions in coordination with the Board of Education and in coordination with the recommendations of our local and statewide health partners, and did that in a way that we have been able to do that successfully throughout the school year. So the idea that we've always followed what they said, we took it into consideration and made a decision based on what was best for our district and our kids. And we're going to continue to do that throughout this school year. So as we take a look at these, the first one is vaccination. We're going to continue to share vaccination opportunities, locations for eligible students and staff. One of the popular questions that I receive is the district going to mandate vaccines? There's no direction at this time or interest or thought that we are going to mandate vaccines. We, as superintendent, I believe, that's a staff member of parents' choice. And we'll continue to share that information if you're interested to get vaccinated. But you just need to understand the different rules and quarantine rules that are there, and Jenny will go through those in a little bit. Wearing masks, as we talked about per the CDC, masks must be worn by all students and staff when on a bus, when at school and indoors. After taking everything into consideration, the decision has been made that masks will be optional for students and staff. Yet we're going to strongly recommend those for those who are unvaccinated. If you take a look at our school district, close to 90% of our, as of last spring, I don't know about the vaccination rates over the summer, but we had upper 80s, low 90s, depending on the group, vaccination rate for our staff. We have all of our students that are 12 or older. I understand not everybody can get vaccinated because of health concerns or health issues, but we have the opportunity for students 12 and up to get vaccinated. So that leaves our preschool and elementary students. And as we go throughout and look at these comprehensively, I'll share why I feel, looking at all of the prevention strategies, we can leave this option for our families to determine what's best for their children and still protect the health and safety of everyone involved. Based on my last reading of the recommendations, obviously they change frequently, but when outdoors, everybody is sharing that masks are really not necessary but optional based on individual preference. Now, before I go on to the rest of it, I know in having conversations with individuals, they want to take this optional mask piece and say, very much divided into two camps. Well, either you're for universal masking or you're not. And that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is right now, the conditions in Strongsville City Schools, based on all factors and the information and the recommendations of our health partners, we believe that we can safely give families the option for their kids and kids the option to wear masks. But should conditions change, and we have evidence to support that we need universal masking or masking by grade level, classroom, building, district, we will implement that. So what I ask is for your understanding and acknowledgement that the district is not saying we're optional mask or we're mandatory mask. We're simply saying we're going to follow the evidence, and when the evidence suggests that we need to implement one of those two pathways, we will. In terms of ventilation, we have a clear ventilation plan for our district. We'll continue to implement that in terms of opening the dampers to bring more outside air in, to circulate the air as frequently and quickly as possible, to have the highest level of filtration status that can work in our HVAC units, as well as cleaning those filters frequently. In terms of social distancing, again, at last read, everybody is suggesting 3 feet. As long as that's not a detriment to educational opportunities or experiences, we are going to work to maintain that in our buildings as well. Again, as long as that doesn't exclude or diminish opportunities for students. In terms of additional mitigation strategies, we will continue to have opportunities for regular hand washing at the elementary level. Hand sanitizer will be available upon all building entrances, high traffic areas, as well as in the classrooms. And we'll continue to teach at the appropriate level and remind about proper respiratory etiquette, which is sneezing and coughing in your elbow, and then washing hands or disinfecting thereafter. In terms of cleaning and disinfection of the school buildings, we're going to continue to implement the same cleaning and disinfection procedures in the classrooms in the areas as we did last year. And then Jenny will talk about the last two in more detail. But we continue to need parents and students to communicate with us as effectively as you did last year, and share with us if your child's not feeling well, keep them home. If there's a positive COVID test in the family, or for you to where a child needs to quarantine, to keep us posted, and we will do the same for our staff. We're going to continue to contact trace, do the isolations, quarantines. There's some evolving guidance in terms of that, and Jenny will get into that. But all of those things that we did in the past, we're going to continue to do. So when you take a look at those strategies comprehensively, we feel that puts everybody in our school district in a place to be safe and healthy. And Jenny will mention it, but I think the new quarantine guidelines really support our decisions in terms of where we feel our kids can be healthy at, whether they're unvaccinated or not, depending on the other procedures that are there. The last note we've talked about already, that based on evidence and trends and data that we have, we may enforce additional restrictions. Really, what does that mean? That means going back into a classroom and saying, effective tomorrow, every student in this classroom, this grade level or building needs to have mandatory masking. We're going to take all the desks and separate them apart again, further than 3 feet to the maximum distance allowable if we can. And that's what that means. Some links here that you may want to check out once we send the presentation. The prevention strategy details, it goes through each of these 8 items with a little more detail, and has a slide per one if you want to see some additional resources. And then if you're wondering, hey, what does this look like at the elementary level or preschool or middle school, high school? You're going to want to click on that school building operating procedures and restrictions. It's going to talk about things maybe that I'm not talking about at a district level, in terms of, hey, what are we doing with lockers? What are we doing with hallways and stairs and class changes and arrival and dismissal? So all of that's in there for you as a nice, easy reference for you. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, who's going to walk us through the COVID symptom and exposure protocols. Jenny?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I really wish I didn't have to talk about this again this year, but in order to keep everybody as safe as possible, as Dr. Iba has shared, that is still what we are striving to do. And so we are going to continue with our protocols in regards to if we have positive cases and or we have people that are students, staff alike that need to quarantine. So what we've tried to do is make it as similar as possible as last year's to alleviate some confusion of when do I quarantine, when do I isolate. But as always, our building principals, myself, our district nurse, Crystal Tackaberry, and all of our nurses within the buildings are here to help you, guide you. Every situation can have nuances to it, and our goal is to make sure that we're as clear as possible with what we're recommending should there be contact with a positive case of COVID. So as you can see here on the slide, if we have anybody that is test positive for COVID-19, the protocol still is you need to isolate for 10 days. And that isolation will start either with the onset of symptoms. And if the symptom onset is in the evening, then it starts the next day. That's day 1, the next day. So unless symptoms start like early morning, we don't count that first day. Or if the individual is asymptomatic and a test is done, then it would start that date that the test is given. And that would go for 10 days. There's no exception to that. It's a full 10-day isolation period that you would need to isolate at home. And just a reminder for our parents that isolation means, isolating in the home too. So unfortunately, if everybody else, is symptom-free, isolating to a bedroom as much as possible, and wearing a mask when you're going in and helping with that isolated individual is very important to keep everybody safe. We will still be investigating who that positive individual had contact with, direct contact, and that goes 2 days prior that somebody could be shedding the virus. And direct contact is defined as being unvaccinated. So I'm going to talk about unvaccinated first, and then I'll go into vaccinated. But unvaccinated and closer than 6 feet apart for a total of 15 minutes over a 24-hour period without a mask, meaning both people do not have masks on, and you were in contact less than 6 feet 24 hours, 15 minutes. What that means, it's a collective. That time adds up throughout the day. So, if your child has lunch with somebody for 3 minutes or 10 minutes, and then is class and is with that person within 6 feet for 3 minutes and no masks, that's when you would be, for a total of 15 minutes throughout the day, would be a direct contact, or within 3 feet for a total of 15 minutes, regardless of mask wearing. So you're that close together within 3 feet. And as Dr. Ryba shared, we're striving to be at least 3 feet apart in all areas, so that we don't really have that issue. So anyone identified as a direct contact unvaccinated will be instructed to quarantine at home for 10 days after exposure, and monitor for symptoms. So a modified quarantine is still what we're going to follow. So what that means is, if we say, yes, your child has been identified as a direct contact, they need to quarantine and monitor for symptoms, on day 5, 6, or 7 of that 10-day period, your child can be tested with a PCR test, and if they are negative, they may return early on day 8. So we're going to continue that. We ended the year with that. It went very well. We saw very minimal cases, if any, that I can recall when they were tested, that usually the symptoms would start much earlier than that. So we feel that that is a good way to go. Again, for those that are unvaccinated, yet a mask is worn by at least one person, either the positive case or the direct contact, and you're 3 to 6 feet apart, then the direct contact would not need to quarantine from school or activities unless symptomatic. Now, this is just for schools, school classrooms and activities. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should, your child should be going to parties or going to big events or hanging out with everybody else. They should still be quarantining at home and watching for symptoms. So it just allows you to have privileges to come to school and attend school events. Go on to the next slide, Cameron. Thank you. So for those that are vaccinated, I'll talk about this. So again, we recognize that our children, younger than 12 can't be vaccinated yet. But for those students that may be vaccinated, there's no limitation to school or school activities if you're determined as a direct contact of a positive case, as long as that person remains asymptomatic. It is still recommended that you get tested 3 to 5 days after exposure. And so if that is what you choose to do as a parent and have your child tested, if they do come back positive, then that isolation piece that I talked about earlier would come into play, and that starts the date of the test. You can't count the days that they were already being quarantined as part of that. So it would start over, and that would be day 1, and your child would have to isolate for those 10 days. Again, they're recommending that you still mask while indoors for 14 days until you get that negative test result. And just a reminder, we are recommending PCR tests and not the rapid test. Feel those are a lot more reliable, and that is what our health partners are recommending as well. Again, if symptoms begin, then we're going to recommend that full quarantine, that full isolation. And like I said before, once you get that positive result, hopefully you won't, but if you do, it is a full 10 days. Again, we're working closely with our Board of Health. We're working closely with our nursing staff, and please cooperate fully. We will ask if your child is vaccinated or unvaccinated. We will we are able to require proof of that. We recently found that out. So we will be looking closely at that, and we're just asking to keep everybody safe. We're asking for your full cooperation as we look into any kind of situation. The guidelines are there at the bottom of that slide for both employees and students if you want to check into that. To keep cases to a minimum, we do want you to continue to monitor for symptoms for your children. So, they're saying now maybe with the Delta variant, they're seeing maybe some sore throats, or they're seeing, more stuffy noses are happening with children. So again, just keep an eye on that, and any symptoms at all, it's best to have your child stay home until the symptoms are gone, or, definitely fever-free. They should not be coming to school for a fever. So really asking for your cooperation and help with that to make sure, and just check in. Hey, how you feeling today? Everything going all right? We definitely don't want people coming to work or school feeling sick. Call our attendance hotline, work with your building administration if you need to report any of those things. We still will have our COVID clinic, which is a separate area from our regular clinics. So if any child comes down and is symptomatic, they will be put into that until the nurse can safely assess whether or not they can either return to class or they should be sent home. And that's going to be in partnership with you. You know, many of our students experience allergies right now, and parents have documentation, or they've recently been tested, and their doctor, your doctor, has recommended that they do not have COVID and pass the test. You know, we will send them back to class. So again, we investigate every situation to make sure, but we will continue to do that just like we did last year. You'll be contacted immediately if your child is experiencing any symptoms. We are going to continue to our communication. So letters will be sent, or communication will be sent via the buildings if there are positive cases in your child's school or classroom, just to keep you informed, so that you can kind of monitor your own child if they're identified as a direct contact. Or, you know, maybe they've been around, or they say, hey, I think I was around somebody. We can keep those lines of communication open as always and work together. So a couple things. I know this was in a few of the questions. I was previewing them as well. If a student is under quarantine, can the student still receive learning? How will that learning continue? So if your child is under quarantine and or isolation and feeling well enough, they will be able to live stream into the classroom. So they'll basically have a window into the classroom to be able to kind of see and follow along with what's going on in the classroom for that time period only, that they are under quarantine or isolation. All of our teachers are still going to utilize Google Classroom for assignments. So they may have something that they can work on independently through Google Classroom and communicate with their teacher that way. So that will be available for all of our students. And through our building communication, the teacher will know, hey, I need to turn on my camera today because I do have some students that are either isolating or quarantined. Again, if we do need to, as Dr. Ryba spoke of, we're going to be able to shift quickly if we need to. So if we need to quarantine an entire class or a building, again, we'll continue with that live instruction, so that our goal, as always, is to keep instruction going and keep kids in school. If a teacher is under quarantine and they're feeling well enough, we're still going to try to get them to live stream as well. Again, it depends on how they're feeling, but as long as they're feeling well enough, they're able to live stream into the classroom while they may be at home quarantining or isolating as well, to again, the goal to keep instruction moving along this year. And then if you have visited our dashboard lately, I've been continuing to update it throughout the summer. I've been doing it on Mondays with our numbers. Our numbers are very, very minimal all summer long. We had summer learning, 0 cases there. And so, you know, it will be updated on Mondays now. If cases do rise or we see a change in what we're experiencing now, I'll move to every single day just to keep you informed, so that you can make those informed decisions and see how many cases are in the building where your child or children attend. I still report all COVID cases to the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, so you may get calls from them as well. If they're contact tracing, you may get a follow-up call, but depending on the volume, sometimes that's days later. So we're going to do our very best to communicate with you immediately, because if your child is exposed, I know you want to know that as soon as possible so that you can monitor for symptoms.
Thank you, Jenny. So, you know, as we have learned through Jenny's discussion about quarantining procedures and isolation procedures, right? Somebody's test COVID positive, they're going to be isolated for 10 days. But as I talked about when we took a look at our health and safety protocols, we have to look at these in combination of one another and not just isolate out certain aspects of it. So when we take a look at our quarantine procedures, these are designed by our health partners and Ohio Department of Health in collaboration with support from the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. The quarantining procedures give basically a level of risk. And they're saying, hey, if you're vaccinated, it doesn't matter where you're at in relation to anyone else. The risk of you getting COVID is so small that you don't need to quarantine. So as we take a look at that piece of it, we understand that our students, 12 and over, they will not need to quarantine at all this year. And the risk of them contracting the Delta variant or COVID is very small based on the quarantine rules that they've set up. But let's take a look at the unvaccinated students, and specifically the quarantining rules there. So again, let's put quarantine procedures with unvaccinated to see what direction are they pointing us to. If you're unvaccinated and you're by somebody that's COVID positive, but you're not considered a direct contact because I'm more than 6 feet, the risk of you contracting COVID is so small that they're saying, come to school, do your normal thing at school, you're good to go. You're not considered a direct contact at all. You can do whatever you want outside of school. They're also saying that, hey, if you're at least 3 feet away, between 3 and 6 feet, and you're unvaccinated and you're wearing a mask, you don't need to quarantine at school at all. The risk of you contracting COVID or the Delta variant is so small that you can still come to school every day. So for our folks that really want the district to mandate masking, specifically at the elementary level, the point of risk is kids being together that are unvaccinated less than 3 feet. In most situations in our schooling, we're going to do everything we can. We'll be able to meet in almost all of our classrooms at 3 feet distance, and work hard in every other to get very close to that. So in terms of the health and safety of our students, we all have the choice of whether our kids are going to wear masks or not going to wear masks, at least at the beginning of the school year. And as this quarantine guidance has suggested and stated, really, that as long as they have a mask and they're 3 feet away, they're 3 or more feet away, they're not a risk to contract or spread COVID. Now, the other thing I want to say, and my goal here today is not to convince anybody that may think differently. It's just simply to share the rationale, and you can make your own decision. But it's important for me for folks to understand the reasoning and the rationale behind why recommendations weren't made. They were not just made with the flip of a hat, and they were done with a lot of thought. But in terms of the elementary level, which seems to be where the majority of the feedback is coming from, because our students don't have the ability to be vaccinated, we are able to control the elementary environment more so than any other environment. We could quickly say, you're not switching classes anymore, you're staying in your class. We can quickly say, hey, we're going to need to eat lunch in a more spread out place and do that. We can quickly say that we can isolate it to this classroom. And what we've learned in this past year is we can tell the directionality in terms of how COVID is spreading and where it's coming from, and mitigate those risks quickly. One of the questions that's come up in the past is, okay, lunch, nobody's wearing a mask, everybody's eating. How does that work? Well, what we're doing is there will be assigned seating in elementary lunches. There will be, kids will be sitting near or with kids that they sit with in class, so we're not exposing different groups of kids, and we can contact trace as we go there. So at the elementary level, we really have the opportunity to control and put restrictions in quickly and support the safety and health of all of our students. Another elementary question that came up that we'll communicate, have the group communicate with you shortly is, we have Right at School, which is a before and after school care program. They have their own health and safety procedures. They're not under the district policy in terms of that piece of it for right now. So we will be communicating with them, and if they haven't already, they'll communicate with you in terms of what the procedures and protocols will be for Right at School if you're participating in that. In terms of the rest of the slides here this afternoon, these are just some resource slides in terms of all the links that we've provided, as well as contact information for me and our other district administrators if you have specific questions about specific areas here. So at this time, I'm going to have Erin come back online, and she can start working us through some questions that may have come in. Erin, some of those questions came in before we gave the presentation, so some of those, please use your judgment if you think we've accurately or adequately covered it. So if you've asked your question and we've covered it already in this presentation, we may not ask it again. But if there's something you'd like me to re-emphasize or state again, or Jenny, or new questions that we haven't talked about, let's have it, and we'll go through that for a few minutes here this afternoon.
Sure. Okay. So what is the metric that's going to determine or have you and the board reconsider mask wearing? Do you have that in place yet?
Yeah, so we are not. Last year there were color-coded systems. There were a variety of systems and metrics that were used by the state. So we're not publicizing or stating specifically if X happens, then we will do Y. But just as, and I shared this at the board meeting, just as a kind of an example, and I'll talk about the a classroom level. If we have a positive case in a classroom, and we have a significant number of quarantines, and we feel that there may be a need to put masking into place. It could be as simple as that. One positive case and a number of quarantines, we could say, okay, the next day we're going to separate our kids further and we are going to require masking. It may be, 2 cases because we're able to tell, is it spreading internally or all of this outside entities? So that's the one thing we didn't know last year, and we learned throughout the year, is contact tracing works, and we're able to see, are students spreading it in school, or is it something that's outside of school? So if we have 2 students and one we feel spread, or the other thing, we take a cautious approach. So if we have 2 kids in a classroom that have COVID and we don't know where they got it from, we assume they spread it internally, and so those restrictions will be put in place. We would put those restrictions in place. Typically, we do that for the length of the quarantine period, and then we start to reduce those restrictions again. So again, I'm just sharing to give context so parents know kind of where my head's at. But I ask that these are examples and scenarios. We use a variety of whether it's spread, COVID prevalence, quarantine. Those are things that we'll take a look at to see as we make those decisions in the coming months.
Have we considered separate masked and unmasked classrooms so families can select the option in which they're most comfortable?
So no, we have not, for 2 reasons. First of all, there is a law that's been passed. It will go in effect until mid-October. And that law states that we cannot treat vaccinated versus unvaccinated individuals differently. So the idea, I know this goes with masks, but the idea that we're recommending unvaccinated wear masks, and kind of taking that globally, we are not going to create classrooms of students that are vaccinated or unvaccinated, or those that want a mask or those that don't want a mask. Our classrooms are set up based on what is in the best educational, social, emotional, academic needs of our students. They're balanced in a variety of ways. And if you take a look at all of the guidance from every health partner, it says in-person learning to best meet the needs of our students. And we're going to do that. And again, for all the reasons I stated, I believe strongly we can do this safely. And if we see spread, we can enact restrictions to continue to do this safely. But we're not going to create separate classrooms for vaccinated versus unvaccinated, or masking versus not masking. And again, I reiterate that in most situations, students are going to be at least 3 feet from another student, which means whether they're vaccinated or not, as long as they're wearing a mask, they don't need to quarantine, which again says that the risk of contracting COVID in that situation is so minimal that students can continue to attend school. So those are the reasons why we're not going to create masked and unmasked classrooms.
Okay, with regard to social distancing, how is that possible when class sizes are so large at the elementary, specifically referencing Moraski, who I think they're maybe at 30? And then is the high school going to have the overflow area again in the auxiliary gym?
So first of all, our class sizes, we do have some classes that are at, K to 3 is 25, class cap we look at 4 and 5 is 30. We were able to do that last year with higher class sizes in some of those areas. It depends on the building and the room. But again, we were socially distancing at 5 feet last year. And so the building principals are working, and we will, as I said, we'll strive to maintain that. So the same answer in terms of the elementary is the same answer in terms of the high school. What's been clear is we are not going to displace students. We're not going to put students in alternative locations or an overflow classroom. We are going to have students in their classroom with in-person live instruction throughout the school day, and work to maintain that 3 feet when we can. If we cannot, we'll get socially distanced as far as we possibly can.
All right. Is it possible to find out if their child's teacher has been vaccinated? Because it may make a difference in whether they mask or do not mask their child.
No, so we've actually, there's a lot of laws that have been passed this summer. And so we've been working with our legal team to determine what we can or cannot request. In terms of the vaccination status, no, we are not as a district. That's not a public record. That's not something we are going to request our staff to share with our families in terms of their vaccination status. So that's something that, as a district, we are not going to share that or state that for our employees. The only time we will be requesting vaccination status is if somebody is considered a direct contact, and we have a specific purpose for that information to determine which quarantine rules to follow. So just the same as we're not going to require it for our staff, we are not at this point going to require students to declare their vaccination status globally. But if there's a quarantine situation, that's where we would request that information.
Okay, so a point of clarification. You said that we will never go to just remote. And what if things continue to get worse, across the country? Will we just continue to keep schools open regardless of what's going on?
So the answer to that is yes, unless there's a change in the law. So right now, by law, I can't go to remote. So what would have to happen in this scenario, if things really got severe with the Delta variant and it was unsafe to keep school open, the legislature would have to get back together and pass an emergency law that says schools have the ability to provide remote learning. Right now, it's against the law to do that. We would lose our funding. We would not be counted as school days in session. So the answer to that is yes, we will keep going in-person learning, excluding if we have to quarantine, like we talked about, for short periods of time in buildings or classes. But globally, putting districts in remote learning, that's not an option right now unless the law changes.
Okay, can you clarify 3 feet separation guideline from health officials is for masked individuals? Why are we not separating students further, as that would be the guideline if students are not masked?
I'd have to look at, I'm not discounting what the individual put. I'd have to look and see the specific verbiage in there. I don't recall reading it that way, but I can't speak offhand in terms of the exactness of what was asked.
Has anyone surveyed students about their feelings regarding masks?
No, we haven't surveyed students about that. In terms of the decision that we made, the decision is what I recommended and the board supported in terms of what we feel is in the best interest of our families and our students. And again, masking is up to the individual student. If they would like to wear a mask, they're more than willing to wear a mask and do that, and staying beyond 3 feet or at 3 feet, they're going to be in a good spot to not have to quarantine. So I guess I look at, in terms of the question, if the question is, well, hey, if the majority of students want a mask, why don't we mandate masks? And the counter argument to that is if the majority of students want a mask, they'll mask, and it'll be a similar situation as to if it was mandated. We believe that parental choice and parental option based on the data that we have right now for our zip code in this area of the county, we have the ability to have optional. So we did not survey students.
All right, this one I know that you addressed, but because it's so important, can you again repeat for anyone who may have logged on later, why do we not have SCS Connects this year?
Great, yeah. So SCS Connects goes back to that discussion I just had about remote learning. Basically, what the law says is students need to be in person or they need to be completely virtual. That live streamed experience in terms of the source of it coming from an in-person building, that law expired at the end of the 2020-21 school year, and it was not extended or renewed. So the same reason we can't go into remote learning or blended learning if COVID numbers spike is the same reason why we can't live stream instruction through an SCS Connects scenario. The legislature has said you're either in person or you're at home, but if you're at home, it has to be your own separate school building. So that's the big thing that made that change. If I'm at home, I am now in a building called the Strongsville Online Learning Opportunity Academy. I'm not a part of Whitney Elementary School or Strongsville Middle School, and therefore I cannot get grades or be a part of that building, excluding extracurricular activities. So for those of you that are interested in the solo program, probably in about 5 minutes, we'll start that conversation about the details of solo.
Okay, and the rest of the questions do deal with solo. Some of them kind of overlap in choices between the two. So if you'd like, I can do a few of these questions now, and then those can log off, or do you want to hold till the end?
Yeah, let's hold and get through the information on solo, and then we can do those questions as well.
Okay, then that's it for now.
All right, well, for those of you that were just here for the operating procedures, just a reminder, we will send this all out. We will share it all out. Anytime, I have to make a decision, the board has to make decisions, especially during this time. I completely understand that we come to this with a different mindset sometimes, different ideas, different thoughts, and some of you may be very excited and happy about the decisions that we made, and some may be frustrated and disappointed. However, we are never going to do anything that we don't feel we can do in the best interest of our students and our staff and our greater community. So as you did last year, I hope we can continue to have meaningful conversations, to understand each other's perspectives, to respect those differences of opinion, and to continue to work to build that shared understanding so we can continue to have a successful school year and best meet the academic, social emotional needs of our students as we go throughout the school year, and keep our schools open and keep our students and staff and our community safe and healthy. So again, all of this information today will be shared out with everybody in an email, and so you'll have access to it. And then if you have building specific questions, please reach out to your building principals. They'll be able to talk to you specifically about what's happening at Chapman versus Moraski versus the middle school versus the high school or preschool. We're more than happy to help out in terms of district decisions. At this time, we're going to transition. So if you're not looking or interested in the Solo Academy, this would be a time to go have a nice rest of your afternoon. But for those that are interested in the Solo Academy, we're going to transition, and Aaron and I are going to share some information with you. Again, for the Solo Academy, we've got a comprehensive resource. Everything that we're going to talk about today in the slides is in one document for you to utilize. And so what we want to do today, we've kind of broke this up into 3 components. Here's guidelines K-12. Remember, our online Solo Academy is only K-12. It doesn't include preschool. And so we've broken up what are rules and procedural things that address all kids. Then here are things specific for K-5, and here's things specific 6-12. So Aaron's going to help me out with the K-5, and then we'll see who needs a break talking at the 6-12. But let's go ahead and talk about the Solo Academy. So again, I've mentioned this throughout. Last year and the many years prior, we've had a virtual school, and we've run it, but legislature has let us run it and not had restrictions or requirements. And now they've created a law that says, here's all of the things that you need to do if you're going to run an online or a virtual school. So as I just talked about, if you're online with us, each district must create a separate building. So we created a Solo Academy. I am the principal of the Solo Academy. It's still a Strongsville, so it's still in the Strongsville City Schools. There's no physical building. It's just a virtual building. But it's its own registered building. So this is important because, as I said, your child is still a Strongsville City School student, but they're no longer assigned to their home school. They're no longer a Whitney student or a middle SMS student. They're a Solo Academy student. So you're going to still receive all the district communications, but you're not going to receive building newsletters because you're no longer a part of that specific building. We'll have communications through the Solo Academy, but if you're thinking about coming back at the second semester, keep up to date with the website, see what's going on in the building. And then if you return to in-person learning, specifically at the elementary level, well, everybody's going to be returned to their home building, but at the elementary level, if the transition happens at the second semester and there's no room in that building at that grade level, then we do not guarantee a spot and you may be placed elsewhere for the second semester. However, in the new year, in 2022, 23, if you decide, if you're going back to in-person learning, you would definitely be at your home building. And we talked about in the last questions why we're no longer allowed to provide remote learning or live streamed instruction or a combination. Last year at the secondary level, we said, hey, if you want to come in for band or orchestra, or here's a world language class or a AP class, you can come in for 1 or 2 classes and then take the rest online. That's no longer an option either. You're either fully virtual or you're fully in person based on that legal change. ODE, that's the Ohio Department of Education. They also put in some learning requirements. They said, hey, school districts, you need to provide students with a free computer. We do that through our Chromebooks, and it has to be equipped with filtering software. We've already got that taken care of. So we'll talk about getting those devices if you don't already have them here later on. Based on parent requests, you should have received a survey. The other thing is we have to make sure all of our families have internet access, stable internet access at home. So we've asked you, if you've got it, great. If not, then we'll work with you to get you that stable internet access at home. Erin shared out in her emails about an orientation meeting and opportunities that are going to be available. Also, we have to track time. Just like there's attendance requirements in in-person school, there's attendance requirements in the Solo Academy. And we'll talk about the hour requirement, but there's going to be we're going to track online activities, and then specifically at all levels, but really it's going to take be more prevalent at the elementary. There's going to be tracking of completed offline activities with participation records, because just like if you went to Strongsville City Schools in person, the minimum school year is 910 hours of instruction. The same applies to our virtual learners. 910 hours of instruction per year, or 455 hours per semester. In terms of the enrollment deadlines, we passed the enrollment deadline for this summer. Our general rules are approval on a case-by-case basis through August 13th. And I'll get to it. It says at the bottom, if there's a major COVID spike, we may reopen the window. We did. I sent that out to everybody on Friday. So in terms of the second semester, so everybody that's enrolled or wants to enroll and enrolls by the deadline tomorrow at 5 p.m., you will be enrolled for the first semester. And once enrolled, you are there for the whole first semester. The only opportunity to come back to in-person learning is in the second semester or to continue on. So the dates for enrollment for the second semester in the Solo Academy are posted there. It'll open on November 29th. It'll close on December 10th. And then we'll do case-by-case basis. If something comes up, you'll have to provide a reason to me. I will consider that through December 27th. And as it said here, due to the shift in COVID and the Delta variant, we opened the enrollment period again, and those were the details that were sent out in our email updates. Again, the reason we had a July 15th deadline is to make sure there was a smooth transition. Everybody got everything they needed before the start of the school year. The 6 to 12 program, we own and contract that program. The K to 5, we contract out to a third party. And they're working hard to make sure every student is able to start by August 18th. But if you missed that July 15th deadline, we just wanted to be transparent and let you know that we're going to do everything possible. But we can't guarantee that kids will be ready to go in K to 5 starting on that August 18th deadline. Participation requirements. So we talked about this is at the discretion of the school district. So what that means is that this is not a right. We do not have to offer this. As I said earlier, very few, probably 1 out of 6 school districts in the state of Ohio is offering this. And what we mean by it's at the discretion of Strongsville City Schools, it's not about, hey, we're going to let some people in and others not. It's more about if you've proven that you're not academically performing in this environment or you're not meeting attendance requirements, We may not allow you to enroll in the next semester because it doesn't seem to be a good educational fit for you. Or if we see we get to, X amount of weeks into the first semester and you're not logging on, you're not doing your work prior to getting too far into the school year, we can state that this is no longer an option and you're required to return to in-person learning, or you would have the option to withdraw from the school district or to homeschool. As we said, students are required to complete one semester minimally. Last year, we allowed more flexibility. That will not be the case this year. In terms of operationally, it's going to be more supportive, and most importantly, educationally, it's in the best interest of our students. As we talked about in the earlier example, our students follow our attendance and truancy policies, and those are through those on and offline hour requirements. And then every 2 weeks, Mrs. Pinney, she's a curriculum supervisor for the elementary. Every 2 weeks, she will be checking in with all of our K-5 students, and Mr. Tomino, our secondary curriculum supervisor, will be checking in with all of our secondary students to make sure, provide progress and attendance checks to make sure we're moving in the right direction. And I talked about this in the last slide in terms of performance or the hours you may be or not allowed to enroll or removed from the Solo Academy. In terms of the online offline requirements, again, 910 hours of any combination of online and offline learning. That's what's required for the school year, 455 hours a semester. So Aaron was nice enough to break this down based on our school calendar. That's about 5 hours a day. A school day that students should be in session, or 25 hours a week of any combination of online or offline learning. At the board meeting the other night, I talked about kindergarten and that we thought at that time we could reduce the hours to the minimum hours for kindergarten. Unfortunately, the Ohio Department of Education rescinded that and said that first feedback was not accurate, that kindergarten students must meet, the way the law is written, the same 910-hour requirement. So just to be clear, technically in the Solo Academy, there is no half-day kindergarten. Students must meet the same hour requirements as full-day kindergarten students or any other student grade 1 to 12. And then in terms of online learning, the learning system will track students when they're actively utilizing that program. So it doesn't mean, hey, I'm going to log on and leave the computer on and go have a snack or play outside. The computer knows when you're actively engaged in utilizing the program, and those are the hours that will be tracked towards that 910. And then, because we are required, as it says there, to defend the time that students are participating online. In terms of offline, it can include a variety of academic activities. There can be some offline work at the secondary level, but this is going to be primarily at the elementary level. So it could be working on a project or some homework or Lexia minutes or working with a reading teacher for our students getting a reading support at certain grade levels. But there's a log. We've created the daily log, offline learning log for you. It's in the slides. So you can click on that. You can share a copy of it with Aaron. And that way we have that, and we could utilize that to track attendance from both online and offline participation. And then we've kind of shared this, that we're tracking both online and offline. We've given you that guide of 5 hours every day, 25 hours a week. You do have flexibility. I know that's why some of the folks, kids and families love this program, as it gave some flexibility. You do have that flexibility, but you still do need to keep pace every 2 weeks, that we should be seeing about 50 hours every 2 weeks of work. Some students may have felt in the past like, oh, I can not do anything for a week and then try and cram everything in. We're going to want to see steady progress based on the new rules. In terms of breakfast and lunch, as I said earlier, breakfast and lunch will be available for students in the Solo Academy. And this details the procedures that you'll be emailed a form to complete. You'll choose whether you want to pick it up on Wednesday and Friday, and then you'll pick up boxes for food for breakfast and lunch for all 5 days. And again, this is at no cost, but we do need you to submit your request and interest in receiving breakfast and lunch. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron, who's going to highlight some of the items from the K-5 program.
All right, thank you. So we've used the platform called Lincoln Learning for about 8 years now. It's the same one that we utilized last year, and this is for our K through 5 students only. What it does, and if you're not familiar with it, we contract through the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio, and that provides each family with a student learning advocate. So that is an adult, actually a teacher, who is the constant communication between the family and the online program and the district. So I know families really appreciate that support. They kind of check in with you. Hey, do you have any questions? They check in with me, so-and-so isn't keeping pace. What can we do? Do you know if there are any issues? Do you have a phone number for this? And then they just reach out. Hey, anything that we can do for you to help. So again, that's K-5, and it's a huge benefit to one of the reasons we offer Lincoln Learning. It is an asynchronous platform. So that means that teachers are on the other end. However, they're not doing live teaching. So you don't have to log in every day from 8 to 3 and watch a teacher teach. It's predominantly student at home, and then they can click through slides. There's videos, things that will read to them or they read. A lot of drag and drop activities, especially for the younger students, with a lot of feedback. There are grades, which we'll get to in a few slides here. So the teachers do grade the work. And there is, a teacher that you can connect with if you need help, if they need office hours or just touch base with a phone call or an online call, you can do that as well. With Lincoln Learning, we are providing the 4 core content courses to begin. So your math and ELA, science and social studies, both for grades 3, 4, and 5. If your grades K1 or 2, they only do a semester of each. So you'll start with a semester of science, and then if you're in second semester, you would have the opposite of social studies. If you aren't, say your child works relatively quickly and they get done and, we still have time left in the year, or they haven't met the 910 hours, we can provide electives. So the Lincoln Learning does offer a handful of elementary electives. We learned a lesson last year. We tried to give families an elective of their choosing as well as their core courses. And about 90% of the students weren't able to complete all of it. So they kind of left, meaning all of the elective. So they left that for last and didn't get through it. So what we felt this year is a better option is to provide the core courses first. And then when students begin to finish those or need more work or want more work, we can then offer the electives. As far as some limitations, Lincoln Learning does not offer gifted programming or gifted courses. And in the past, as you know, we were able to do some sorts of in-person or live streaming. We had, gifted live streaming into a classroom. Due to the legal requirements that Dr. Riba has been talking about, we're not able to do that. That also means that our 5th graders, unfortunately, cannot participate in band or orchestra or any of those individual lessons because those do take place during the school day. We are going to provide supports for our students. So again, this is unique in that, I'm really proud of this program we're able to offer. If your child has a 504 plan, that is given to the teachers on the other end of Lincoln, and they're able to put those accommodations in place. We are going to support our English learners. So our students who have limited English proficiency, we just know it's best if we can help support them while they're young, while we have them, and not wait the entire year. So we will have a teacher working weekly with some of our students who need English instruction as well. And that does count toward the logged minutes that you can utilize. As far as gifted services, as I talked about, we don't offer specific gifted classes. However, we are going to offer some supplemental support for any students who are identified gifted. So we have a Strongsville City Schools teacher. We can't call it service, but we'll still have somebody that will check in with those who are identified gifted, see if there's anything that the kids might need, maybe provide some access to their Google Classroom or their projects or some enrichment, just because, again, we want to provide the best program we can, even though we know we're limited in the online platform. Students that have IEPs. So I know one of the questions was, do you have to waive services if you're on an IEP and you want to do solo? The answer to that holistically is no. We are going to work with the students. We're going to work with case managers and the families to see if this is the best fit for students. So all students are going to have an IEP team meeting to talk about, can we meet the needs of the student in the online program? So if we can, and we can provide the specially designed instruction, and we can meet the minutes, and it works for the child, we absolutely will provide that. If there are some things that may need adjusted, that's part of the IEP team decision. And again, it's so specific that it's hard to speak globally about it. But do know if your child is on an IEP and this is a good fit for him or her, they will still receive specially designed instruction and meet the needed minutes that they have in their IEP, or it will be adjusted as part of the team decision. We are going to offer for our students grades K1 and 2 supplemental live reading instruction. So this is one area in which, when we reviewed last year and previous years, one area in which we know we do a great job at Strongsville City Schools. And beyond just the computer piece, which is good, we also want to provide some additional work. So our teachers, we actually have a teacher hired that's going to work with our K1 and 2 students on a weekly basis. We'll set that up with your family, but it will be a live online Google Meet. And that teacher will do some of the things that maybe don't happen in the program. So we have our foundations, if you're familiar with that. We have we call it Haggerty, but it's phonemic awareness and manipulation of sounds. So it's additional work beyond the online program, because as we know, our youngest learners, we need to make sure they're getting all those key fundamental skills. Additionally, students who are on RIMPs, or Reading Improvement Monitoring Plans, in grade 3, we're going to ensure that those students are also getting the supports they need to be on track for 3rd grade reading. And then again, we're going to look at our numbers. If there are other students in 4th and 5th grade who could benefit from some of the small group reading instruction, we may be able to do that as well. A lot of times we are asked, can we still have access to Lexia and some of the online programs? And that answer is yes. That can also count in your offline journal or log toward meeting minutes. We know that 5 hours a day, especially for kindergartners, that's a lot. So if we can break it up and we can allow them to do some Lexia time, or maybe RAS kids, they can read a book, as long as it's contributing to their academic education. When they're working with a specialized teacher, all of that will count. As far as grades, we are going to mimic K through 2, as you know, have just standards-based report cards. So they don't get an overall grade in a subject area. So we will continue to do that. So even though Lincoln Learning will provide us an actual percentage, such as an 80% B, we will correlate that to an M, P, or N for the report card. For grades 3, 4, and 5, we will do the overall letter grade. So however the child does in the program in each unique subject area, we will put that onto the report card. We are going to do semesters instead of trimesters for our elementary students, and that's a little bit different. But what it does is helps alleviate some of that incongruity between, we have 3 trimesters to report on, but we only have 2 semesters of Lincoln Learning. So that will simplify the process, I think, for everybody. And then the question is, if a student would come into solo at semester, or maybe leave solo at the semester, what do we do with that work? Where does that factor in? And that answer is, we will take what work has been done thus far, whether it was in the classroom or whether it was on the online platform, and factor that in to the rest of the grade. So it sounds a little nebulous now, but there is a way in which we do that. So student isn't missing out on, I did all this work for nothing. We do kind of correlate those grades together. Question about extracurricular activities. So just as a reminder, an extracurricular is something that happens outside of the school day. So it's not during the school day. A child, once the final bell rings, if a building has an extracurricular, the children in solo are allowed to take part in that. You'd want to make sure that you're checking with the buildings to see what is offered. Again, we as a district are not going to provide transportation to or from your house to those activities. But if there is something that's run by the building or that you want to take part in, by all means, you are absolutely welcome to do so. With regard to testing, those of you who were in the program last year, you're familiar with this piece of it. We highly encourage you to do our state testing and our district testing. Now, we understand that if you're at home, there's probably a reason that you're at home and you don't want to be around a lot of people. So we work really hard to keep it a secure environment, to keep it a safe environment, and follow protocols. Some of these testing, we have a kindergarten test that we give all incoming kindergartners. That is a state test. We also have our Ames Web benchmarking. We give that 3 times a year. Last year, we were able to do some of that online. So you may have been one of the families that did the Ames Web online. We also have our gifted whole grade screenings, they're Iowa and COGAT. And then, of course, for grades 3, 4, and 5, we have our state testing. For grade 3, there is a fall reading test. So all that being said, we do highly encourage you, if you are able, to come to our board office. So you're not going to the building. We will give you plenty of time to make that decision. We will make sure we have appropriate measures in place to limit contact. However, we do understand if it's not something that you are able to do due to health restrictions or just safety protocols in general. This is important. There's an online orientation this Wednesday. So 10 a.m. this Wednesday. The Zoom link was sent out to all students who had previously registered for Lincoln Learning. Now, if you've registered since Friday when it was reopened, you don't yet have that link. I will be sending it to you. But what this is a live online call with the providers of Lincoln Learning. And then also all of the student learning advocates will be on there as well. So they'll go over what can you expect with Lincoln Learning? How do you access the program? What are things we need to know? How do you work with your student learning advocate? And I'll be on the call as well. If you're not able to make it live, we will record it and we'll send it out to all of those who are registered for Lincoln Learning. And then another important piece, we will have the workbooks printed for you again. We learned that last year that was beneficial. So you can pick up both your Chromebook and these workbook materials starting on Wednesday of this week. And we're going to give you quite a few days to pick from. You can come the 11th, 12th, 13th, or 16th, anytime our building is open. And again, that's the administrative offices here on Cook Road or Cook Avenue. We do ask each family to take a Chromebook of ours. Again, to meet the mandates of the House bill, it has the filters on it. If you're doing Ames Web, we need you to have one of our Chromebooks. So it just kind of makes it a little more protected on our end, with regards to ensuring that your student is on the right program and they're doing what they need to be doing. Fees. There may be fees assessed to students in the Solo Academy. They were approved last year at the Board of Education. It would be for any workbooks that we're using that are consumables and then foundation materials. So you will see they're minimal fees, but you will see those on your student fees. And there is an option to purchase Chromebook insurance. You can opt in for that, or you don't have to take it. And that's something that you'll get in Power School. Would you like me to keep going, Dr. Ryba?
So Erin, it's up to you. If you want to keep going, that's good with me. If you need a break, I could take over for you, whatever works.
All right, I'll keep going.
Sounds good.
A lot today. So for grades 6 through 12, we are going to use the platform called Edmentum. And the official name is Ed Options, because Edmentum has a variety of different platforms or programs within it. So some of you, again, used this last year. Some of you may have used it over the summer. But this is for our grades 6 through 12. This is our one platform. We are not utilizing Edgenuity like we have in the past. So similarly, it's an asynchronous format, meaning there's not live teaching. Students log in and complete the work. They read video or watch videos, and they can read some of the online things, navigate virtual labs, those type of things. There are teachers on the other end. They do help with supporting, remediating. They offer on-demand office hours. There's actually, if you need help with math, you can click on something and right away get instantaneous help. So teacher-wise, you will be receiving grades from virtual teachers, and they will be issued as semester grades only. So similar to what we do at the high school in general, we just take a first semester and a second semester grade. Each class has a final exam that's built into the course, so that just becomes part of your grade. So if you're at the high school level, you won't take a separate final exam that will get denoted on your report card or your transcript. It just gets encompassed into that semester 1 or semester 2 grade. We do have the course listings. When we share this with you, you can go through them. There's different ones for middle school and then grades 9 through 12. At the middle school level, we are asking and signing students up for 5 courses, and that's a lot. Similarly, if you get done and you want to take an additional elective, we can allow that, but we're going to start everybody with 5 classes. That will be your typical 4 core courses, and then the 5th one could be a career exploration, it could be a health, it just depends on the grade level. High school students, we need to follow what our handbook and program of studies for the high school says, and that is that in order to be a full-time student, you have to be earning 5.5 credits per school year. So what we are doing is signing students up for 6 classes for the first semester, and then that gives you a little bit of flexibility second semester. You can either take 5 or you can take 6. We are working in conjunction with your high school counselor to make sure that we're putting you in the courses that you need so that you're on track to graduate. With regard to honors courses, grades 6 through 8 do not offer honors courses in Edmentum. So please note that if you're signing up for the Solo Academy, with the exception of math, you're not going to have an option for any of your honors ELA, honor science, honor social studies. With math, we can put you in your advanced track. So if you were on track to do honors algebra 1, we can still put you in the honors algebra 1 course. If you are going to do APA, similarly honor 6, we can make that happen, but that's the only subject area in the middle school. For grades 9 through 12, we are limited in some capacities as to what we can offer. Performance-based courses, as you know, we're not able to duplicate that online. We also know that we're not able to stream in. So if it is a performance-based class, such as, we'll say, music, band, we have to find a replacement course for that. There are some AP offerings, but not all of them. We are blessed to have a high school that offers so many honors and AP courses. Unfortunately, those are not all offered through our online platform. So we will work to find a corresponding course that will work for your graduation pathway. Again, just to reiterate, we're not able to participate live streamed in, so we can't have classes at high school or middle school such as art, band, orchestra, science labs, those type of things, you're either all online or all completely in school. And that is different from in the past. Same thing for instructional supports. 504 plans, we will provide the page of accommodations to our Edmentum providers so that they can meet those accommodations. If we have English learners and we have students that need support in English, we will work to provide some of that online as well on a weekly basis so that our kids are growing in their English acquisition as well as in their academics. Students on IEPs, it's a duplicate of what I said earlier. For the most part, you have an IEP team meeting. The team can determine, this will work for your goals and your specially designed instruction. Virtual learning plan, it all aligns, and so we can put you in the program and then work to get your specially designed instruction, your accommodations, all of those things met. I do want to reiterate that it is an individual team decision, which means it's different for every student. So encourage you to reach out to your case manager. You will be getting some additional guidance if you are one of these families who has a child on an IEP. You'll be hearing from us with regards to their virtual learning plan and what that entails and how that might look for your child. Grading and report cards, pretty similar to traditional grading. We will take the grades from the providers. So Edmentum will give us the percentage and the grade at the end of the course. We put those onto your high school transcript. You are still a Strongsville City Schools student, so transcript will look the same as it does for any Strongsville City Schools student. And again, we have 2 semester grades. So if you're in semester 1 for solo, you'll get a semester 1 final grade. That encompasses the final exam. So you won't have quarter, final exam grade. You'll just have 1 grade for the semester. Same thing, if you come into it for the second semester, you would get a 3rd and 4th grade combination with that final exam. So you end up with 1 grade for semester 2. With regards to athletic extracurricular activities, as a reminder, an extracurricular activity is something that takes place outside of the school day, and it doesn't have an in-school component. So as long as there are no co-curricular components, your student doesn't have to be in a class during the school day. They can come afterwards, after the school day is over, and take part in the extracurricular. So things like orchestra and band and show choir, unfortunately, those do have a co-curricular component. So they have a graded course throughout the day. So those are not able to be participated in, again, because of the legislation in House Bill 110. As a reminder, we don't provide transportation if you're coming from home to an extracurricular. That would be on your own. Same thing with athletics. I neglected to say that on the last slide, but that applies to athletics, as does the eligibility piece. So you want to make sure that you are keeping grades up. The athletic director does call, gets the grades, make sure that the child is eligible to compete, and also that they have enough courses. And if we have students that may be planning to participate at the college level, we have to make sure our NCAA required courses are met. We can do that. We usually do that just in case, but just know that we are cognizant of that and setting you up so that you can become a college athlete using this program. If your child wants to take part in Polaris or College Credit Plus and has those things already lined up, they can do both. Now, the College Credit Plus would be something outside of the high school one. We do offer, the internal College Credit Plus. If it's during the school day, they cannot do that. However, if it's a Tri-C, they certainly are Cuyahoga, any of the local colleges, they can certainly do both. Again, provided they've already met the requirements. So they would already be enrolled in Polaris. There is an option to utilize our busing. So when requested, they can receive transportation from near their house, wherever their bus stop is, to the high school, and then shuttled to Polaris. That's if your son or daughter doesn't have their own transportation and wants to take advantage of that. You also have to ensure that policies and procedures, as well as the calendar, all of that is followed for Polaris and College Credit Plus. Again, with the state testing, we are highly encouraging students to take part in these state mandated tests. As the students get older and into high school, they become even more important as they become a part of a graduation requirement. We also offer ACT, and that's at the junior level for everybody. If you're in an AP course, you do need to take the AP test, so keep that in mind. And that is an in-person only test. So we will put everything into place to keep the appropriate measures, keep things compliant with CDC and ODH, but know going into it that we are going to highly recommend that your child come in to take tests if at all possible. There's an orientation for Edmentum that is fabulous. I was going to do my own where I kind of walk through everything. However, I watched theirs and I decided that was way better than what I can do. So as you receive this, there's a link there that you can access and a passcode to put in. And it's a recorded Edmentum Ed Options webinar. It will give you all of the information that you need. Now, it's not Strongsville specific, but everything that they talk about is applicable. They'll show you where to get some guides and resources, where you need to go to look at grades, anything that you possibly could need is there. I'm also here, Mr. Tamina's also here. We can do follow-up questions. But we thought that was the best way to give you all the information in a succinct manner, and you can watch it at your convenience. If you are doing Strongsville Academy, it gets a little confusing, but if your child is in like the Plato Credit Recovery, that's a separate program, so you don't need to watch that webinar. The webinar is for our students who are doing the Solo Academy, and you would know if your child's going to do credit recovery, it's different. We are, again, asking all students to take a Chromebook if they don't already have one. So some of our upperclassmen already have a Chromebook. We are going to ask you to pick them up at our administrative building, again, August 11th, 12th, 13th, or 16th during the hours of 8 to 4. We do ask that all students who are participating take one of these district-issued Chromebooks to complete their online work. For program fees, there may be fees associated. It would be in accordance with what we adopted at last year's board meeting. That would be anything that students are using consumables at home. I can tell you there are very few at the upper levels, the 6th through 12th grade. You can opt in for the insurance if you wish for your Chromebook. And if you want to take part in what the traditional high school student does, where each year they're charged $25, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. When they graduate, they own the Chromebook. You can still do that as well, and that will be provided as an option.
All right, Erin, great job. Catch your breath there a little bit. Thanks for sharing all of that information. And again, these slides will be emailed out to everybody. All of the links in there will be accessible. I've asked Dan to kind of start sorting through some of the solo questions that maybe we haven't addressed in the presentation, as Erin maybe takes a little break here and looks as well. But Dan, anything that's on the sheet that questions any of us can answer at this point?
Sure. Let's start out with a question about a student who is trying to decide on if they're in solo, or a parent who's trying to decide for their student if they're in solo for the first semester. It sounds like they're in band, and based on some of the things that they might miss, how will they reacclimate themselves to a potential spot in the band if they come back to in-person learning second semester?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So that's a great question. Did they say grade level at all on there?
Sixth grade.
Okay. So sixth grade, that's something that the answer, my answer to older kids that know that have been playing their instrument for a while, versus sixth grade. So I would encourage you, if you have the means to do so, to keep up with private lessons or practicing or things of that nature as your child just getting used to their lessons. But our music department, whether it's orchestra, vocal, or band, they definitely want to keep and retain our students that are interested in participating in music. So, do your part on your end by continuing to practice or give private lessons or, access music in different ways. But this is something to reach out and discuss with the music teachers. As long as sixth grade, as long as there may be a playing test or requirement to make sure that the student can come in and continue on, because it's the person's such a young musician. Older grades will be able to transition a little smoother, but our instrumental music and vocal music department will do whatever it takes to help support students transition in, whether it's this second semester or the beginning of next year. So reach out to the middle school, find out who the sixth grade band teachers are, and send them an email and they'll work with you.
Next question is about just to reiterate, enrollment in solo. If my kids are going in person in school, depending on the scenario conditions that happen through the course of the first semester, will solo be an option for the second half of the year for someone maybe wanting to enroll in that program halfway through the year?
Yes, so if you are starting in-person learning, you will have the opportunity to enroll in solo for the second semester of this school year. So yes, that is an option. The only thing that's not an option is enrolling halfway through. So if you don't enroll in this deadline, or give me a case-by-case scenario by the 13th of August, you are in-person learning for the whole first semester. Same thing, if you enroll in the Solo Academy, you are in the Solo Academy for the entire first semester. So part of that is just management and ensuring our kids are not moving back and forth. And then educationally, this question was asked quite a bit last year. Our courses aligned? Is third grade math and Lincoln Learning aligned to third grade math in Strongsville City Schools? The answer is yes. They're all based on the state standards. We've looked at kind of their pacing guides. Even teacher A to teacher B in the same building, they're close, but they may not always be exactly at the same spot. That's the same kind of scenario with our online providers. However, we want to make sure that we know exactly what students should know and be able to do at the end of a semester in Lincoln Learning. And to alleviate any disruptions in the students' learning, that semester piece is key. So yes, second semester, you can make a different decision than you did first, but not within each of the semesters.
I believe this question also pertains to solo. The specific question is, how does a parent request to view the full curriculum being taught?
Erin, you want to take that one?
I do. I do have, beyond just the course guide, I have specific course descriptions of each of these. So just reach out to me. I can help you locate exactly what you need or want. And then the last question, I'll save Dan the logging back in. Is there a group or community forum for parents to connect and discuss issues throughout the year? I'm making the assumption that the person is referencing solo. And what we did last year is we did have all parents have the option of opting in and sharing their names, kids' ages, those type of things, so that parents could reach out and talk with one another. Something different we're going to do this year as well is have a Google Classroom that parents can get on, and I can distribute messages that way. So instead of me sending dozens of emails, we can post there as another alternative, and parents can log in and see that as well. Another question just came in, so I'm trying to read it quickly. Oops. Does a third grade Lincoln Learning student need to do all the work on a Chromebook, or can they work on their own PC and just do tests and such? You can work on your own Chromebook. Just note that, again, by law, we have to provide a district issued one that has the filtering software and some of the components to keep us compliant. If you are comfortable with your child being on their own device, then, you know, we as a district, we won't interfere. Again, we do ask you to take a device, though, so that you can be, you're able to log in to do the Ames web testing and those type of things that are specific to our district platform. And that is all the questions that I see.
Well, thank you, Erin. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and hanging on with us for the last 45 minutes for the Solo Academy discussion. Again, all of this information and slides will be sent out here within the hour. And don't forget, tomorrow at 5 p.m., the enrollment window for our Solo Academy for the first semester closes. Beyond that, through the 13th, which is Friday, I will take on a case-by-case basis, but there's got to be a specific reason as to why we couldn't meet the deadlines. Why do we have these deadlines? So that we can make sure all kids are enrolled, ready to go. Hopefully by August 18th, that first day of school. If not, then shortly thereafter. So we have a smooth start to your virtual school year. So once again, thanks for being a part of the discussion. If you have any individual questions, reach out to Erin Green or me, and we look forward to working with you and supporting your students in a wonderful school year, whether in person or virtual. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and a great week ahead.